Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Basic Assurances webinar series. First of all, I want to tell you I have a little touch of bronchitis, so I'll do my best to not cough through this. But if you hear me sound a little rough in the voice, that's why. But anyway, my name is Betsy Burns, and I've been a quality enhancement specialist for a little over 4 years, initially starting part-time and full-time in the last 2 years. And I did begin my career in the early 80s in the role of direct support, and then transitioned in positions that include Director of Education and Training, Children's Services, Support Services, Service Coordination, and Program Administration. So I have some experience supervising staff and collecting data and learning how to create some quality programs and services for staff, for the people we support. So today we're going to be talking about Factor 7, Staff Resources and Supports. We're hoping you all walk away with more ideas how to truly implement the basic assurances for people receiving support. You know, I know that if any of you have been following this, we've been talking about our mission and our vision and mission. We're going to continue that same process and give you a refresher for everyone about CQL and what we're about. You know, we have a very specific vision, a world of dignity, opportunity, and community for all people being emphasized. And what we're saying is that all people are important, not just people with disabilities or people who share our same beliefs when we're looking up and building our communities. We can't exist in a silo specifically for any one type of person, but we have to be forward thinking about what a good future looks like for everyone. Our mission is that CQL is dedicated to the definition, measurement, and improvement of personal quality of life. Again, you see the emphasis is on the personal part of this. My definition of quality of life probably looks a bit different from yours, and it should be celebrated and supported in that way. As we're supporting people to define quality, we're also supporting them to live the best possible lives they can. Change inspires us. Quality is a continuous journey, not a destination. We really believe that changing practices, learning, and growing are all signs of a healthy organization. We partner with a lot of providers and systems with this in mind. Quality really is a continuous journey, not a destination. Providers that are committed to providing quality supports as defined by the people they support share this same idea. We were always going to be on a quality journey towards quality, but that the target will likely move as people's expectations change. We know about people's expectations by asking them. In fact, David Cooperrider wrote, "We live in a world our questions create." With that said, isn't it possible that the quality of the answers we get will be based on the quality of the questions that we ask? There are a few concepts that we keep in mind as we're partnering with organizations that really do set us apart from other accrediting bodies. We believe in an appreciative approach to quality enhancement. You know, all organizations have things they're doing really well, and we'd like to use those great practices and spread them out to areas that may not be as strong. When you think about appreciative inquiry, it was really pioneered in the 1980s by David Cooperrider and 3 other professors. To understand this process at the basic level, the following points you might need to understand. Appreciative inquiry focuses on leveraging an organization's core strengths rather than seeking to overcome or minimize its weaknesses. Organizations move in the direction of what they study. It makes a conscious choice to study the best of an organization, its positive core. Appreciative inquiry is a top-down, not a top-down or bottom-up change process, but rather a whole system approach. So we really do look at opportunities, not deficiencies, and we look at a continuous quality improvement. At CQL, we don't say organizations have deficiencies. We get enough of that through audits and other types of surveys. Rather, we believe that organizations we partner with have the skills to be the best organizations, so we can ensure they know where their opportunities are. In fact, David Cooperrider also said we need to discover the root causes of success rather than the root causes of failure. Again, we really believe in this quality journey, and we believe that we don't have everything mastered and that there are opportunities to learn new skills and to provide support in creative and what may seem somewhat improbable and unexpected ways. So today's webinar will focus on this agenda. If you've been into any of the last 6 webinars or recognize some of these pieces, we'll start with a quick introduction of the basic assurances. We'll talk about the process and evidence collection, the process, how we connect with you when we first talk with you on the phone, the process of you putting in a self-assessment, the information you give to us, and then what we talk to you about when we arrive there. For factor 7, there are 5 indicators. We'll go into the indicators one at a time and look at the probes a little more in depth and how the concepts may be implemented in your organization. We'll also talk about what CQL reviewers will be looking for in each area and about validation and decision-making and how we get there. We'll talk about data points that we want to look at in factor 10. And finally, we'll take some questions at the end. So basically, this is all about the basic assurance as the foundation for quality in an organization. Next. The list of 10 basic assurances. The last several months, we've gone through factors 1 through 6, and we'll continue these webinars until February of 2020 to really support you to get a deeper understanding of what the basic assurances are and how they'll be used. You know, one of the things we always refer people to is that manual. If you have any questions about basic assurances, it's a really good idea to look at the manual you've received at your accreditation. There's a lot of really good narrative in there and a lot of really good explanation about all of the indicators and the probes that help support the indicators to reach the factor. It goes over what the basis is for each factor, what we're looking for, and the evidence and questions we may have. So here you see listed 1 through 10, rights, protection, promotion, dignity and respect. Number 3, natural support network. Number 4, protection from abuse, neglect, mistreatment, exploitation. 5, best possible health. 6, safe environment. 7, which we're talking about today, staff resources and supports. And the ones in the future we'll be talking about that are part of the basic assurances are 8, positive services and supports. 9, continuity and personal security. And 10, the basic assurances system, what you're doing to monitor factors 1 through 9. Well, the introduction to basic assurances that focus on the essential, fundamental, and non-negotiable requirements for all services and support providers. I like that it says non-negotiable because it really pushes us to think about what the most basic types of support we should be providing to all people and what really an essential building block to ensure that people can define their own quality of life, like we define our quality of life. We talk about what the non-negotiable factors are non-negotiables are in factor 7, Organizations are encouraged to implement consensus best practices in relation to each measure. The basic assurances require more than compliance with licensing and certification standards. We use this tool to understand the effectiveness of practice through the perspective of each person. So the basic assurances structure. There are factors which are made up of indicators, and each indicator is made up of probes. The probes help you define what the indicator is, helps you reach an understanding of what the indicator is, and all the indicators helps you understand what the factor means. Factor 7 is broken up into 5 indicators. As an example on a screen, there's indicator 7A. The organization implements a system for staff recruitment and retention. It's broken into 7 probes. So for example, this is one of my favorites. Do people supported by the organization participate in the organization's staff recruitment and retention programs? Usually when we come to this, people say no, but that's a really good idea. We think so too. So 2 components we look at, system and practice. When we think about system, we think about policies, we think about something that provides a structure. It could be procedures, staff training, or other types of systems. When we think about practices, we look at what's observed in daily operation. We look at how people behave, how your systems are put into action. You need a system which is a strong foundation, and the practices are based on what your systems say that you're going to do. Next slide, please. Really, at this point, we look at process and evidence. And through this process, we look at document review. Document review could be a variety of different things, which we'll talk about in a little bit. We're going to do observation and visits. Observation when we go and do site visits. You know, sometimes we do several, sometimes we do little. We like to look at if you support people in various different types of residential homes. We like to look at different sizes, the different number of people there. We love to have the people we support give us tours, and in fact, they seem to enjoy that as well. So we really look at that. We look at how people are doing things, how staff are working with the people supported. We have focus groups. We have focus groups for people supported. We have focus groups with staff. Sometimes we have family focus groups. And those are really telling. We really ask questions in those groups that are reflective of the basic assurances. And in every single group, we always get the most wonderful information. And oftentimes organizations don't typically hear that information. We do factor review, and factor review is an opportunity to really sit and have a conversation with organizations after they've already submitted their assessment, after we've already reviewed their policies previously to arriving there. Factor review is just kind of having an open conversation about what all the probes in each indicator for each factor means. And then we do personal outcome measures interviews. It depends on the size of the organization and the type of services are provided. Sometimes we'll do one if it's a small organization, sometimes two, oftentimes three, maybe four. And we like to often do personal outcome measures interview around specific areas that might be related to someone who might have a restriction in place. And that way we can kind of see that process and through the behavior support plan and how the restrictions there and how it's gone through HRC and so on. We may do a personal outcome measure about someone who's had a more serious medical condition or someone who's been involved in a more recent allegation of abuse, neglect, mistreatment, or exploitation. We also may do one-on-one focused conversations with people. When we look at document review, it's interesting. A lot of people upload information, and there's a lot of good information to review before we get it, organizations. And oftentimes people give us this wonderful, beautiful cornucopia of files and things to look at when we get there. But what that means is we look at your policies around the systems we're looking for, and particularly in this one, Factor 7, we look at your procedures. We look at your personnel files in Factor 7. We want to see if the hiring processes that are based on the factors in basic assurances, Factor 7, meet the standards that are legal and also are part of what we expect you to have. We want to see if there's a good hiring process, there's good information, conversation you have with staffing, and to see what kind of input they have. And it's kind of cool to look in files to see that the people supported might have input on people's personnel files and how they feel about their staff. We look at staffing plans and how they fit for that particular organization. We look at data. As we said, we're driven by data. We look at hiring and turnover analysis. Employee satisfaction surveys are something we look at, and how they're implemented and how they're reflected upon in records, staff training records, in staffing plans, as well as in personnel files and within the people we support. And we also talk about that in focus groups. But in terms of document review, we also look at documents that help get any other adequate picture of staff resources and supports that you may have. And sometimes that might be newsletters. It might be DSP week and what you've done for that. We might see the employee of the month or any kind of tangible or intangible reward systems that you put into place. Observation and visits. We want to look at, do staff know people by their name or preferred name? So we do listen to the verbiage that staff use when working with the people they support. Sometimes it's you hear things like my people or folks and things, and sometimes some of those things aren't too difficult. It's nice to hear people just call them by their preferred name, whether it's a nickname or a formal name. We look at how long staff say they've known people. We look at, does there appear to be a sufficient number of staff who know the people well? Are there too many people that don't know enough about the person? We look at, are staff trained in people's person-centered plans, and how are they trained, and what do they know about their plans? And do they seem to know what people's preferences are? Focus groups. They can be conducted with people supported, as I said, staff, families, and others, depending on types of services and accreditation that you're seeking. We've had focus groups where it's been families, but with board members as well who've also been families. Everyone looks a little bit different. Sometimes I've even done a focus group with children. And it was interesting. I was working with an organization who supported people diagnosed with autistic spectrum disorder, and I think there were 8 kiddos in the group, and each of them had a staff with them, which was great to support them. And we kind of did this huge coloring poster about things that were important to them. And I think there was a couple of parents in that group too, so that was kind of a mixed bag. So their focus group obviously looked very different than maybe people support in an organization that supports adults with developmental and intellectual disabilities. So it really does depend on the services and supports one provides. Also did a focus group with individuals who are in foster care services, and that looks very different when you do focus groups like that. So the questions are reflective of the types of services that you provide. The questions are really built around the basic assurances so that we have a good picture of seeing how the practices are put in place when we do the focus groups for the basic assurances. The focus groups really allow us to better understand your systems and practices from the people that are affected by them. So, for example, we will, in focus groups for people supported, we might say, who chooses your staff? Are you involved in hiring any staff? Some people say yes. Oftentimes people say, no, that's not my job, or no, that's the manager's job. People say you're involved in staff training. Some people say, no, I'd like to be. Other people have said yes, and I get paid $15 an hour. So that's pretty cool to hear. What kind of employee training incentive programs are there? So when we talk to staff, we talk about their training, and we talk about how they feel when they get their training. Is it sufficient? Some people feel that it's too computer orientated, which I get in today's world, that there's not enough time, it seems, to get the training in. Some people have some really good shadowing programs that they do. Some people are heavily involved in giving feedback to their organization about employee training, and some organizations have the people they supported heavily involved in their recruitment and retention training for employees. Incentive programs, there's been a variety, which I'll speak to a little bit later. We do talk about incentive programs. It will never fail, and it will never change. I probably can guarantee you that always a little bit more money people would like, you know. I will tell you that I know that Factor 7 staff resource and supports is a toughie. You know, we always hear there's not enough staff. There's, you know, it's a crisis. It's been going on for a long time. We'll talk a little bit more about that as well, and about some things some organizations have done. However, you know, I've met some people who've gone to work for organizations because they believe in them. They believe in their mission, vision, and their values more than they do others, even though they get less money. So employee incentive programs can be pretty good if they're intangible as well. You know, we joke with organizations, there's something in the water here, that the culture and the foundation of an organization lends itself greatly to employee and training incentives and intangible and tangible reinforcement and rewards. We also want to make sure there's sufficient staff for you to do the things you want to do for the people they support. We want to know the people supported can do the things they want to do, or if they have to go on group activities, even if they don't want to go because there's not enough staff. When we do factor review, this is an area to be really aware that people from all service lines are part of the factor discussions. The things that we're talking to organizations more and more about is to engage the people you support in as much aspect of your organization as much as possible, and make it sure it's a reciprocal relationship. And we say this too about factor discussions. It's so enlightening to have the people you support involved in the process in all aspects of your organization. And when you do factor discussions, it takes a different tone, and it lends itself to even aha moments of staff sitting there doing factor review. So for Factor 7, it's great to have your HR represented. It's also great to ensure that someone from maybe your residential or day program, community living or vocational or any other service lines are also sharing what that practice looks like on a day-to-day basis. And it's also important, as I said, of course, to include the people you support. We've also had board members and family members involved in factor reviews. It's really important to bring success stories to illustrate the factors. It's a great opportunity for you to provide examples of what each area of your practice looks like. It's also an opportunity to ask questions and share any best practices you have. it's an opportunity to clarify what all the probes mean in every of the indicators that we speak about in this factor. We really, truly want the meetings to be collaborative. Personal outcome measures. Personal outcome measures really allows us to better understand the quality to the perspective of the person. So when we look at the indicators in all basic assurances, when we look in Factor 7, we look at how are people involved in their lives, how they're involved in staffing. If you think about personal outcome measures in terms of continuity and security, one of the questions there is do they have control of the direct support staff that come in and out of their organizations? You know, this is a really important thing to people. And sometimes the people supported know that people are leaving before the staff, the organization knows. I did a personal outcome measures interview once with someone, and they said, well, I know so-and-so's leaving. And I said, well, gee, how do you know that? And they said, well, because they were filling an application out in our house. So there's a lot of ways that we find out information about staff resources and supports and how we can better enhance how we provide those supports and how we train staff on how to work with people supported on understanding staffing and some of the staffing crises and things that happen. And personal outcome measures allows us to better understand quality from that person's perspective. Their experience helps us to understand the effectiveness of systems and practices implemented. And interviewees are often selected from categories such as people with restrictions in place, as I discussed, or extensive health supports. You know, I will share a quick story here. I work with an organization, and it was really poignant. They were going through a lot of staffing crises. A lot of people have all across the United States. But I asked all of them, why are you here? What got you involved in this business? And they said, well, I got here, and this wasn't a personal outcome measures interview. I was talking with a group of staff. And I got here because of Frank, who's sitting next to me, who was a person who received services for many years in the organization and now was hired in some capacity to work for the organization. And I said, I work here because of this person. And I said, well, why is that? And they said, well, many years ago, in fact, 38 years ago, I started working here, and I decided I wanted to work at a residential program. I didn't really know what it was, but I decided I wanted to work for a residential program, and I was brought in, and they said, here's the house, here's the people, I got to go, see you later. And the reason why I stayed here 38 years is because this gentleman sitting next to me, which is the person they supported. And the person they support is the one that did the staff training for the first 3 months. So you find this out by not only talking to staff and focus groups, but also by having conversations with people about personal outcome measures. We, again, also do targeted conversations sometimes if needed. So indicator A, the organization implements a system for staff recruitment and retention. Well, there are 7 probes in this factor. The first one, does the organization recruit and hire staff in accordance with all applicable laws and organizational requirements? This is pretty straightforward. It's heavily regulated. This is pretty typically seen as present. Sometimes it might not be, but typically it's there. Do organizations use employment screening procedures to minimize unnecessary or unreasonable risk? This is typically present as well. Number 3, you see our annual hiring plans developed and implemented based on an analysis of turnover, availability of qualified candidates, supports needed by people, and other relevant data, such as the length of time it takes to hire staff, or is there a hiring lag? Now here you see this is bolded, and the reason why is that sometimes people, particularly smaller organizations, kind of have a conversation. A hiring plan is important because it's something that's built. It's a strategic, not a strategic plan, but it can be part of a strategic plan. It's developed based on what you're looking at that happened in the past and what your analysis of your turnover is, and what your analysis is why people left, how long they stayed, what were the reasons for their separation, what other things that you found out about that reason why they left. Availability of qualified candidates. How do you know if you have enough candidates available for you? That's something that we'll talk about in the context of working with schools and other placement options, as we will talk in the future, another probe. That you have a opportunity that you can work with people in your community, at your local school, to really talk up the type of job that you would have as an opportunity for people graduating from high school or even colleges? What kind of supports do your people need, and how are you finding those supports? What kind of staffing are you looking for those people? And any other data such as, like I said, the length of time it takes to hire staff, or your lag in hiring a staff that would support a hiring plan. Does the organization work with schools? I referenced that in the previous slide, and job placement services to ensure the availability of an adequate present future supply of qualified candidates. You know, some people do really well in this area, and, you know, this is an opportunity. Many people might not be public speakers, but to go into schools on a regular basis, to find someone that graduated from a recent high school or from a recent college and go in and start doing presentations in schools, bring the people you support with you and talk about the work you do, talk about opportunities for people, talk about opportunities for future candidates, and really work on that area. You know, it certainly isn't going to hurt, but it can always help you have a future supply of qualified candidates. Number 5, does the organization have a system for conducting employee satisfaction surveys? And if so, what does that look like? You know, one of the things I've already said is we do focus groups when we do accreditation, and staff also often say, well, let's keep doing this. We love this, have focus groups. You know, every organization has a different system for conducting employee satisfaction surveys. They might be a survey monkey. It might be something that people aren't comfortable doing. Sometimes people have had pizza parties and then they fill out a survey. Sometimes they have it mailed. There's a lot of different ways you can conduct employee satisfaction surveys. The key is to do them. It's really important to do them. And also to figure out the best questions to ask. Remember, the quality answer that you receive on those is going to be based on the quality of the questions you ask. And there's a lot of resources out there about Gallup poll questions and so on, about good employee satisfaction surveys and questions you can ask around those. Number 6, does the organization analyze satisfaction survey results and reasons for separation as part of its staff retention system? Why is this important? Because if you're going to ask the question, you want people's feedback. There's a lot of programs and supplies that we have. The best and the biggest program supply you have in an organization is the direct support professional, and getting their feedback is key. It is so valuable and important to find out what their information is and how they feel about the organization, how they feel about what's going on. And to not only to find that out, but actually take that information and use it to enhance your DSP population and other supports that you may have in an organization. So do people supported by the organization participate in the organization's staff recruitment and retention programs? Again, I indicated earlier, this is one of my favorite ones. People supported make a big difference in your staff recruitment and retention programs. As a former staff development director, I heavily engaged self-advocates in training. And even though, you know, some of the aspects of training they couldn't do parts of, they could certainly help with flip charts. They could certainly help take notes. They could certainly talk about a certain piece of their rights or a variety of different things, but having them in the room made a big difference on how that whole training piece went. And having them involved in the recruitment, you know, at the CQL's recent Dare to Dream conference, an organization that was there doing a presentation has started to collect data around retention rates in relation to Probe 7. They've been doing this for about a year and a half. In other words, do people supported by the organization participate in the organization's staff recruitment and retention? They do now. And so they took baseline on the number of staff that they had before they had people supported involved in recruitment and retention. And they compared it a year and a half later to since they've had people involved, and their retention rate has remained the same. They have improved their retention rates. So, you know, they even commented that the person that was at the conference said that they didn't think they should hire a staff person, and the staff person went ahead and hired them anyway, and they were gone within 2 weeks. So the joke was they were now listening to them more. So engage the people you support. You know, they're starting to collect data around that. Who knows? There might be something to probe number 7. Indicator B, the organization implements an ongoing staff development program. I remember a number of years ago going to a presentation, and I was a director of staff training and development. And a lot of organizations at the time were getting rid of their staff training programs, and I was fighting it tooth and nail. And my presentation was removing staff development from your budget. Not. You know, one of the things we do not want to cut is staff training. We might want to look at how we're doing it. We might want to look at a different way that we do it. We might want to consider all the different aspects of it, but we want to keep doing it. Does the organization orient new employees to its philosophy, vision, mission, beliefs, goals, organizations, programs, and practices? No, I've seen organizations actually put their mission and vision in part of job descriptions and the unifying values in there, which is a pretty cool way to supervise. Because, you know, we want people to follow those things, but, you know, if we really embed that in orientation, within employees, and in philosophy, it has an impact. You know, you don't want to just have people talk the talk, you want to have them walk the walk. 2, does the initial orientation and future training for employment advancement ensure effective, efficient, and competent job performance? You know, initial orientation is key. And then doing a check-in, you know, finding out what future training for employment advancement will ensure effective and efficient, competent job performance. It can't be just a one and done. We really need to do that plan, do, check, act. Everyone learns differently. So our trainings and how we orientate employees and how we do future training will have a huge impact on future advancing employees to stay in the job, but also the job that they actually do for the people supported. Probe number 3 are opportunities available for continuing education and best practices within and outside the organization. Sometimes we think we need to do it all. We don't. There's a lot of organizations that offer continuing education for free, or outside organizations, you can do webinars. UL has a lot of them, but other organizations have free webinars. There's all sorts of networking opportunities for people to get continuing education and learn about best practices within and outside organizations. The idea is that that's an intangible support and reward that you can offer your employees to help them learn and grow in a more positive, pro-social way to keep them involved in your own organization. Probe number 4, does the organization implement ongoing in-service training programs to maintain, update, and improve staff competency? Brown bag lunches, easy peasy. You know, it doesn't take a lot to implement an ongoing in-service training program. Make it a fun opportunity. By the way, get staff engaged. Have a volunteer staff training program where people take turns doing in-service training, looking up different topics, and be involved in their own training. Number 5 is a staff training program developed based on input. There you go, just said that in the last probe. From support staff, input from people supported, and are the results of internal and external findings. So why is this so valuable and important? Because if the staff don't understand what you're saying and they don't have input on that, then how are they going to learn to be better at the job they do? And input from the people supported, how do we know how to provide supports if we don't ask? Remember, the quality answer is going to be based on the quality questions we ask. And if we aren't engaging, involving staff and the people supported in training, then how are we going to know how to provide better training and offer better support? Number 6 is training based on adult learning theory. Does it include mentoring, on-the-job support, and personal development planning? Everyone learns differently. So we need to learn how everyone learns, and we need to ask them about it, up to and including talking to people into their one-to-one supervision meetings and how we could better support them in doing their jobs. Because as leaders and helping people, you know, it's not a responsibility to do their jobs, but we are accountable to help them learn how to do their jobs. Indicator C, the support needs of individuals shape the hiring, training, and assignment of all staff. When we look at this, it says as a single and bolded team identified by each person, but includes the person and others critical to assessing and providing needed support. So think about that. If people have input in the hiring process and recruitment process, wouldn't they also have some voice in identifying teams identified? that includes them and others critical to assessing what they need in their lives. You know, when we think about our futures, our basic assurances, wouldn't we want that for our lives? We should expect no different for the people we support. Do people coordinate the teams and their plans? And when we talk about people and all of these factors, people means the people you support. Do people coordinate the teams and their plans? So do they get to coordinate who's on their teams? You know, some people just get a letter saying your meeting's coming up. I think we're getting better at that. We're all getting better at that. We want to make sure people are really having conversations on a regular basis about who's coordinating their teams, how are they coordinating their plans. We want to have support as necessary for women in the organization. And do people have sufficient professional and direct support staff to provide needed services and supports in accordance to their plans? So, you know, we want to have good plans for people, but we also want to have sufficient professional and direct support staff to provide those needed services. The organization implements systems to promote continuity and consistency of direct support professionals. There are 6 probes in this area. Position staffing plan that includes all funded staff positions. And I know that some of you are thinking, yes, we do that. We just can't keep them filled, okay? It's understood. So this probe is about, have you developed a staffing plan? That's your plan that includes all funded staffing positions. That's what that probe means. So the bolded one on 2, does the organization implement an on-duty work schedule for supervisory, professional, and direct support staff that's sufficient to provide services and supports people need? And people need different supports based on, you know, it's not just, it's certainly want to do healthcare and safety, but it's also about other supports people need. I mean, what about people's needs for spirituality, going to church, all those types of things that are more important to others than they might be to the person, the other person, housemate they live with. We want to make sure that we implement an on-duty work schedule that meets and is sufficient to provide those services and supports. Number 3, does the organization have a system that addresses people's preferences and choices when hiring or identifying regularly assigned staff to them? So how would you go about doing that? How would you go about having a system that addresses people's preferences and choices when hiring or identifying regularly assigned staff? I've seen some people have a conversation with people. They actually meet with them, whether it's meet with them in their homes or meet with them individually, about who would you prefer, what type of people would you like to work with you, what are some of the things that the people you like now that you're working with, what are some things you would like to do that someone else might have the same hobbies that you have. So asking questions around that, you could come up with a very simple questionnaire. You would incorporate that as part of a survey that you hand out to people you support and families. You could do that in a variety of different ways. But that is the system. So what kind of system would you use to find out what people want for staff that are assigned to them? Number 4, are there systems for managing staff assignments so that people have, these words, continuity and consistency of needed services and supports when their regularly assigned staff are absent? You know, this is key, you know, for people. There actually is a video I'll reference later well, I'll reference it later, but it speaks to this, and it's kind of a funny, they make kind of a joke about it, but consistent, well, is your name so-and-so? And so people come in and pick people up, and they didn't know what staff was picking them up. So there's a video that we can reference you about this. Also, I remember doing a focus group in an organization, and that was one of the things that people supported really struggled with. They said, you know, I really appreciate at least a phone call. If the staff I'm expecting is not going to be there, can give me a call and let me know who it's going to be. And the interesting part about that is that's kind of something that we would typically do for each other. But sometimes we kind of fail to do that in our systems. We want to make sure that people have that continuity and consistency of needed services and supports when their regularly assigned staff are absent, and let them know that if we can't get someone to you, we'll make sure we have a phone call. We'll let you know who's going to be there. Number 5, is there a system to collect and use data regarding absenteeism, including the reason and length of the absence, and overtime to improve continuity and consistency of staff assignments? So this is where people, a lot of times people look at this through their payroll process. how long have they been gone? What's the reason for it? Because after 3 days, sometimes people have to have a doctor's note or talk to their supervisor. This is where supervision comes in pretty heavily here. And speaking to overtime. Overtime, some people have built in their schedules as part of their pay, which is not always necessarily a good thing. So that's something that we want to look at data around that. Does the organization have an emergency staffing plan that at a minimum provides the supports people need to keep people safe? Obviously, that's key, health and safety. Okay, indicator E. The organization treats its employees with dignity, respect, and fairness. This has 5 probes. Does the organization provide staff with personnel policies, procedures, or handbook that informs them of its personnel practices, benefits, pay plan, due process procedures, and opportunities for continuing education? This is pretty important, and even small organizations have this. It provides staff with a handbook they can go back to read and review. It gives you a system that you can meet with staff about to remind them of their personnel policies, other practices, benefits. Due process is really important. Oftentimes we'll see a personnel handbook that doesn't have due process in there. Why is due process important? It's important for all people. And we push this when we talk about that due process in a lot of aspects of our supports and services, but due process is important for all of us to understand what our process is regard to who we go to if there's a problem. How does that process work? Do organizations' personnel policies, procedures, and practices meet all state and federal fair labor laws? This is regulated and traditionally there. Number 3, does the organization provide staff a job description that describes the position's duties and responsibilities? We do look at this, and we look at that when we look at personnel records. And one thing about the job description that's important is it does need to describe what the job does, but also I've seen job descriptions that kind of describes it somewhat like a basic assurance. It has the title, and then it has an indicator, and then it has probes that describes kind of action steps around the job, which I think is found helpful. The other thing about a job description is it's something that's important to continue to bring up in your supervision. It's important to really meet with staff about that, because it's too often people read it, they sign it, they can't remember it, and it gets put in their file, and then they get evaluated a year later and they don't remember that was there. So it's, it's the manager's, the leader's responsibility to bring that out if that's a system that defines a practice that's expected. Number 4 is staff performance with respect to the job description evaluated during a probationary period and annually thereafter. As a director of programs over the years, those things pile up. And I know that anyone's listening on this that has done performance reviews knows this. It's so important. One of the key things in terms of supporting people around their jobs, because we are accountable for that, is to make sure that we look at their job descriptions, bring it into their supervisions, bring it into the evaluation, look at it. Does it really meet with the job someone's doing? And are people really doing that? And your performance evaluations include their opinions and their objectives for professional and personal growth. Getting feedback from the person and getting their engagement in their own job is really important. It's not just a matter of, yeah, you're meeting all the steps. It's what do you think about that, and how could we improve this? And having that reciprocal relationship with your staff. I've also seen some employee evaluations that have feedback based on the person supported, which is also great. And I've also seen that from a family's perspective, depending on the types of services organizations provide. Number 5, does the organization have employee incentive programs that includes tangible and intangible rewards important to staff? This is pretty important too. And once again, everyone always say more money is always great. We have seen some cases that people are still making not a lot of money, and they love the organization. They will do anything they can to work for them. A simple T-shirt with their swag on it is important to them, but it's the respect and dignity they feel and they get from the organization, and that's that intangible piece. If you go to the next slide, Seth, there's some things I want to share about staff resources and supports, so we can talk more about the intangible and tangible support. So one of the things about doing staff resources and supports, you hear so much. Joe Macbeth at our conference talking about the staffing crisis again. I always tell people, you know what, we got to do is what we got to do is what we have here. We cannot control budgets necessarily, we cannot control funding. We can only control what we control. So I say read, research. We have a lot of, CQL has a lot of resources available to you, a lot of organizations, a lot of other professionals have information available for you. The first bulleted point is actually a webinar, a challenge for professionals. You can get on our webpage. You just go to webinars and look for this address, and it's a webinar that's pre-recorded. You can download the slides. Usually attached with those are also other resources and articles you can read. The next 7, I think there's 7, are articles. Yeah, 7 resources. Developing your human resources. Article on direct support professionals. Article on direct support professionals and personal outcomes and how they apply and how they make a difference in people's lives and direct supports lives. Next slide. DSPs and quality of life with people at IDD. You know, how the DSP is going to have the most impact on the PPU support, not that management, not that board members, not that other people are not important, but the person will have the most impact on the people supported our direct support professionals. Empowering the direct support professional workplace, the DSP crisis, reimbursement rates, retention, and research, recognizing excellence in direct support. Here's some other resources that I came up with. When we work with CQL, we talk to so many people about the tangible and intangible. Budget, funding is such a problem. You know, we understand that, you know, direct support and doing the work that the people and organizations do is not the same as working at Walmart. It is not the same as flipping burgers. We understand that. And the only way around this is really going toward doing the best you can with what you have where you are and doing what you have control over. And here's some things that organizations have shared with me that they've done to work on intangible or tangible rewards and supports, education, training, and how to really work with what they have where they are with regard to staff supports. The bucket list, you can see that's in Vancouver, Canada. It's actually an awards program that makes it easy and fun for employees and managers to recognize one another. Their platform can create custom awards or choose from their existing library of ideas like innovation awards, sales awards, or core value awards. It's called a bucket list, and people actually, organizations, you have to check into it. It does cost you a little bit to start. That said, I've heard a lot of positive things about that. That they actually get different level of points for different things, that they can have a list of things they can purchase based on the points they get. So it's kind of a cool kind of reinforcement system. It's kind of like a spot bonus or a gas card you give on every once in a while. But the bucket list is something that organizations have found to be pretty successful. The National Alliance for Direct Support Professionals, you know, they're a great organization. They are doing such hard work at trying to help people. All over the United States, I've worked and I've asked people about it, and they've said, you know, I've heard about it. Yeah, I've read some of the stuff. These people really want to help. You know, they provide professional development and opportunities along with a resulting recognition and acknowledgement that employees deserve. You know, whether DSP pursues their certification or frontline supervisor benefits from an in-depth curriculum, they really equip organizations with tools to help employees succeed. You know, so, you know, give them a call, check their webpage out. They're an incredible group of people. And they get it, by the way. They've been direct support. You know, over the last 3 years, CQL has partnered with the National Alliance for Direct Support Professionals for an annual campaign to feature articles and videos of DSPs who are providing exemplary supports for people to achieve their individually defined outcomes. So once again, check them out if you haven't. WorkShare, I found this on the web. WorkShare I found an example from an organization that they're looking at different parts of their organization to find people that don't traditionally do direct support to do direct support. So for example, they're finding people in the organization that has certain hobbies. And say, for example, it's, I don't know, scrapbooking, and someone in HR likes to scrapbook, or someone that in direct or that needs support likes to scrapbook too, so they link them together, and suddenly there's someone taking someone out as in HR as a secondary job for them. So they're doing work share, if you will, to trying to find a different way to provide supports for people that they serve. The book From Bud to Boss, I recently heard about this, and I said, geez, it's been out there, I think, since 2011. It's, you know, we often promote people who are really great DSPs in the management positions, and then some do well, and others struggle with the job. Sometimes they take it for the money, sometimes they take it for you know, ooh, that's pretty good, look at me, but aren't always equipped to do the job. And this is a book by Kevin Eikenberry and Guy Harris that covers that scenario. How do you transition from being one of the gang to being a successful leader? So I would check it out. You can certainly get that in Amazon, or you can order it from a bookstore, or you know, you can look online and see the different comments around that. Staff fundraising. I've talked to organizations who've actually done staff fundraising. You know, we've done fundraising for this equipment or this supply, but this organization decided to do fund development for their staff. And although they didn't, you know, get an enormous amount of money to support staff, they got a lot of money that were people were writing in, giving them a couple $1,000s here and there to help support their staff and the good work they do. So that's really outside the box thinking. I also met an organization that's not on here. I forgot this one. Staff came to them with the idea of a Shark Tank, you know, that program you see on TV. And so every year now they're doing Shark Tank for organizations for their staffing to come up with ideas on how to better the organization. And the two things they've done so far is, one, they're bringing in a meet and greet with people in the community, talk about social capital, and they're having the people in the community come in to meet the people they support and staff, and finding out likes and differences of things that they can engage in that they enjoy doing together, learning how to get along with people, learning what we like in different people's lives, and help supporting that. Another job they did is that a staff person came up with fixing wheelchairs and walkers in their own program site, and they got someone in the community that does a free training on that to come in, and so staff are being trained on how to do that. And the staff gets some type of stipend for coming up with those ideas. There's a video I recently watched, Open Future Learning, called Turnover is No Joke. I referenced that earlier, that talks about that staff person that was supposed to come get someone, but now it's a different staff person. Seth is going to link that for all of you, so you can, if you haven't seen that video, he'll link that to the resources he'll give you at the end of this session. The American Network of Community Options and Resources, ANCHOR, and the Training Center Community Integration at the University of Minnesota has developed a direct support professional toolkit that provides guides and videos and other helpful information. Along with all of that, the webinar articles and resources, we've also produced many other research and policy briefs to assist you and draw attention to the DSP workforce issues, as well as advocate for change. You know, these can be useful in communicating with various stakeholders, including policymakers, industry leadership, provider agencies, and people receiving supports and more. So I know I'm working on the time here. Wow, did the hour go fast? So we'll go to the next slide. When we look at staff resources and supports, we talk about validation and decision-making. Next slide. Each probe is validated and present or not present based on evidence obtained during our review. Each indicator is validated at the systems and practice level. Indicators are validated based on the preponderance of evidence related to an indicator, not based on a given number of probes found to be present or not present. So it's based on, not on the number present, but on the importance of the evidence that's related to that indicator that we find. During an accreditation, when an indicator is found to not be present in systems or practice, an action plan is required, and the title of the indicator is not always a complete description of all the elements contained within an indicator. So that's important to understand that as well. When you see this, for example, based on what I just said, for indicator 7D, the organization implements systems that promote continuity and consistency of direct support professionals, Probes 1, 2, and 5 address the development and implementation of staffing plans that are sufficient to provide services and the collection of data that may improve the continuity and consistency of staff assignments. So those 3 areas address that specific piece. When we look at measurables, we look at hiring and turnover analysis, people supported, family, employee satisfaction surveys, training curricula. We look at pre, post tests for training, evaluation of training, staff training records, performance evaluations. So now let's talk a little bit about data. For this area, you see that on average, agencies had 8.8 of the 10 possible factor indicators in systems and practices. On an average, agency had a 4.4 out of 5 possible factor indicator practices in place and an average of 4.4 systems in place. This figure shows what percentage of agencies had each indicator present on CQL review. This data comes from 2015 to 2017 data, and it's 177 organizations. So really, to look at all these areas, you'd have to take this slide and go back to those probes and look at the percentages and what those probes are. This figure shows the differences in organization self-assessment and CQL reviewers for Factor 7 indicators. It does show that organizations overestimate the presence of most every indicator, and more organizations are most likely to overestimate systems and practice for 7AP, that you implement a system for staff recruitment and retention. That's an area organizations truly do struggle with. This figure shows the impact having Factor 7 in both systems and practices in place. According to our statistical analysis, the more Factor 7 indicator organization has present, the better they do on the total basic assurances. For example, an organization that has none of Factor 7 indicators present is expected to have 51% of the total 92 indicators present, system and practice, whereas an organization that has all 10 of Factor 7 indicators present, systems and practices, is expected to have 91% of the total basic assurances present. When organizations attend to staff resources and supports in both their systems and practices, they're not only significantly more likely to have all the other factors present, they're more likely to have enhanced quality services. Okay, this slide shows on 72, 71, 71, 75, and 74. These are outcome correlations that we do for POMS, and the numbers indicate the relationship between this probe and the Factor 7 score. The important thing is that it lists them in order of importance. For example, having these probes present, the organization is most likely to have higher scores in Factor 7. So look at those areas. On-duty work schedule, and I emphasize that. Orientate new employees, I emphasize that. Develop a sufficient staffing plan, I emphasize that. Assist in collect and use data regarding absenteeism, emphasize that as well. And does the organization implement ongoing in-service training program? I emphasize that as well. And last, I just want to leave you with this quote, and I apologize, we're out of time. I just want to say that another David Cooperrider quote, it could be argued that all leadership is appreciative leadership. It's the capacity to see the best in the world around us, in our colleagues and in the groups we're trying to lead. It's the capacity to see the most creative and improbable opportunities in the marketplace. It's the capacity to see what an appreciative eye, the true, the good, and the better, and the possible.